Why, hello, and welcome to another episode of the weekly Ready Communities Update. My name is Chad Renando.
Good morning, Chad, and I'm Kerry Grace. And before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and elders past and present.
Excellent. Thank you, Kerry. And it's been another really big week as we're both in region in Grafton and preparing for another week in Kempsey next week as well. We are in our year one for Grafton, year two for Kempsey for the Ready Communities program. Yeah, and it's been massive. We're well and truly in the thick of the Ready Communities Ready Activation events as we lead into the conference, which is coming up September. And yeah, Kerry, we had a really good one for housing on Monday. How did that go?
Look, it was a great meeting. There weren't a lot of people there, but as we've been telling other practitioners, and this is really important to note, you're not going to start a movement in 5 seconds in a regional community. So there's no point rocking up thinking that you're going to get hundreds of people turning up for something. It's really a slow burn. So understanding that if you get 5 people attend a meeting, that's actually really good because they're likely, if they engage in it, to come back with more next time. Housing's always a tricky one for us because it's always on our agenda because it impacts every single regional community. But us learning what our exact role in that is something that's an ongoing process for us. So the meeting was really great. As I said to the practitioners in the room, we're not talking about things that are new. In the housing market, there's issues that have been around for a long, long time, and there's systemic change that really needs to happen. And I guess that systemic change is one of the reasons why we exist.
Yeah, because you looked at housing, like you've been looking at it for a long time back with your role when you were with the RDA. And we're also working with Mission Australia and Jesse Taylor, who's really an advocate for some of that system level change, trying to look at it from all the different factors. And as you say, our role from obviously we're in community for the 10 months leading up to the conference, supporting them for the year after. And you have to respect and acknowledge all of the work that's already happening at the same time, saying, well, what could be done and what's the little thing that we might be able to do to advance the conversation.
Yeah, gentle approach is really important. I have done things before where you can create essentially a great big bang when you come into a community. Led facilitations that have landed in applause. And I mean, to be honest, Chad, that stuff really worries me now because it feels like it's something that will be led to be doomed quite quickly because community sometimes does look for quick fixes. And I completely get that because there's so much pain and vicarious trauma and things that have happened in regional communities that just aren't fair and they're beyond anybody's control. But none of these things are going to be fixed quickly. And I can pretty much guarantee you they're also not going to be fixed by outsiders. What outsiders can do is we used this metaphor a few weeks ago, hold a window as opposed to a mirror up to the community to share additional resources and different ways of doing things. And that's exactly what we're doing in these communities.
And at the same time, just say, so what might be done? And so we are doing some things, particularly around the conference, which is opening up some opportunities for billeting. I know we tried a bit of that in Kempsey. Some of the things worked there, and we're continuing that with a bit more structure for more programs in Grafton this year leading up to the conference. But also part of that is trying to get that behavior change, which then might lead into additional things, and then tying that into the Jacaranda Festival, which is really big in Grafton as well.
Yeah, I'm loving everything I hear about the Jacaranda Festival. It's not just something that happens in its actual festival period. It actually goes all year, and the youth leadership program associated with it is phenomenal, actually. So it's been really good to be able to partner with the festival and start developing up the shop local card with our conference partner Ash from Leave Town. And yes, as you said, also that billeting program. So there would be very few people that have talked to me in the last couple of years that haven't heard about my passion for sharing houses. And that's what we hope it will stimulate.
That youth program you mentioned, we also encountered it, as we've said before in these episodes. You went to the radio station and they have a youth program. We caught up with Rotary this week, and really interesting. When you look at regions and we look at mapping in regions, you always look for what functions are being done and what roles are doing those functions, and it will differ. Like there's typically always that function being done in a region. Sometimes it's not, and that's a gap. But who does that can vary. And so with this particular one, the Rotary that we met with, really strong emphasis on youth. And they've got like 3 or 4 different youth programs, different ages of youth, different factors from youth in high school, grades 9 and 10, to youth making that transition to career, to youth exchange programs with other countries. It was really just encouraging and amazing to see their passion for it and how they're building that capacity in the community.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is the kind of thing that funding bodies can really struggle to encapsulate. Like I think about some employment programs I've delivered through the years, and it's always based on how many numbers did you get? And really measuring numbers of bums on seats or jobs or whatever it is, it's not really the most productive measure of success or change in a community because who knows how long that job is going to be kept. Whereas these guys are just plugging away. Now, I apologize to Chris if he's listening. I think he said the program's been running for 60 years, the student exchange program, and bringing in 1 or 2 or 3 young people every year. That's cultural change that has ripple effects throughout the whole community. And who knows what those people are going to go on to do as adults and encouraging their own children in their own community into the future. That's real stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. I seem to recall that they were talking about how it's been going since the 60s, actually, of having young people come through. It was absolutely amazing. And speaking of not necessarily looking for the end numbers or the net and impact per se, but more the conditions that lead to it, we caught up with the impact facilitators as well this week. And just for everyone's understanding, uh, when we launched in Kempsey, we focused on the focus areas and then looked for the leaders to emerge. One of the big changes for Grafton this year is we engaged with the leaders and then worked through to determine what those focus areas might be through those leaders. And so we met with a bunch of the leaders this week. It was really good because we also then shared some of the Readiness Index results. And we're actually starting to find a way to present that back to them in a meaningful way. And that's going to create a readiness roadmap for them where collectively they say, here are the things that are a little bit potentially weaker for our community that we all agree on. Here's the things that are strengths. And so practically what might need to happen and looking at it, things rather than saying, what are all the initiatives you want to do in your community? What are 2 or 3 things you might do to improve that particular aspect of readiness and have that cumulative effect leading up to the conference and over the next 12 months after? It was really just an encouraging conversation. We were in there for like an hour and a half. And also one final other point I'll make, you're always surprised when we meet these leaders, which everybody points to and says, you know, you got these people would be good, and you talk to them and wow, you're an amazing impact facilitator. And you have a meeting like this and they all come in and they introduce themselves because they haven't met before. Like it just always blows me away how these kind of programs kind of connect people together. And then again, for the next hour and a half, just riffing on what could be done.
Yeah, I really love that conversation as well. And I don't know if we'll ever agree on the word leader because I would call all of them doers and in their community. So I think that whole leader word has all of these connotations that we'll find them with a title and a role and a platform of some kind. But the people that actually get things done in communities aren't always those humans. And I think if we go chasing leaders by title, we're not necessarily going to find the same richness that we did in that room. What really excited me about that conversation was being able to really have a robust conversation with some doers in the community about the underpinning factors that will enable them to drive change. And it's not putting band-aids on things, it's not chasing jobs, it's not chasing things that are very transactional, it's actually creating cultural change. And we had that really good conversation about the theme which we've landed on to call lifelong learning, which will be led from by Aaron from the Country University Centre, and how that is a really good language to discover and discuss what is aspirational in the community as opposed to looking at fixing things. So there will be a readiness event coming up in that area, and I'm really excited about that because it gives us an opportunity to open up a conversation to the community about what is positive and what can be positive over a long term and how creating culture change can actually sustain more than a band-aid.
And I love that. And this is one of the themes that are coming through in the conference in September is that notion, learning is evidence by action, right? And so we are going to be talking lifelong learning. I loved how that conversation turned into learning personally as an individual, learning as my organization or firm, and learning collectively as a community. and we know we've learned by evidence of our actions. And so when we have that readiness event in August, we're going to talk about those. We're going to have a conference in September, and we're going to follow up in October, November, and say, well, what did we learn? What is the evidence of what we've done? So really getting that practical outcome there. You've got another event. You had one yesterday, and you have another one today as well. Another readiness
Yeah,
event.
so it was really great to have Carmen Stewart came to run some of her Imagine Northern Rivers workshops, which they were really great to be in. They had good attendance as well. There were several councillors there from Clarence Council too. So what I really loved about that workshop, it wasn't a normal laundry list, which, as people would know by now, we've become quite critical of. Maybe that's just reflection on my past career. Um, it wasn't a laundry list of things that people wanted to happen. It was a really beautifully facilitated insight around what the world could look like and what the community could look like 60 years from now. And the responses are quite phenomenal. So Carmen's doing this all across the Northern Rivers. And eventually, I think she said she's already got about 2,500 data points, and this is just the beginning of the project. She's doing it all year long. So the other exciting thing about the program is it's very community led. So it's not government funded, similar to us. It's a program that is absolutely driven, designed, and implemented by the community. So this body of information will be ready around the end of the year at some stage that Carmen's put together.
Excellent. Actually, I look forward to seeing some of those results. And yeah, it was great to have Carmen in the community as well. Just like all activities, good activity in order to kind of bring those conversations together. Uh, One other point, I know we were talking about this just before, and we touched on a bit in our conversation, is the notion of the initiatives and what can be done. When we have, when you get people together and they start becoming aware of the system, they start becoming aware of all the interconnectedness and we kind of rise our heads up above, it can be very tempting that with that awareness comes a desire for immediate action. You say, oh, I see it clearly now, and so then we want to act. It's also a trap for people who come from outside the community. They come in and say, oh, I see everything clearly. If you just do this, if you just do these initiatives. But the challenge is that a lot of the opportunities or challenges in the community, they are deep and embedded and cultural, and there's a lot of history behind them. And if I make a change here, it's going to have another change here. Things are happening because of a certain reason in a way. And so one of the things that we find is that sometimes the best thing to do is just sit and observe and wonder why. But also that helps getting the different types of facilitators around to look at it from different ways and have that co-creation process where we bring what we bring as far as external facilitation, but really that wisdom in the room of the facilitators. And we were even seeing that this week of those things coming up.
Yeah, I think, well, I'd probably like to preface what I'm about to say is we don't have all the solutions, and a lot of these conversations that we have are more about stimulating conversation and getting the thoughts, our current thoughts out of our mind than anything else. So then what I would want to say is I would love to see more funding bodies coming into town and starting at the end rather than starting at the beginning. So having conversations with community about what exactly is going to happen once this funding dries up, or once the well dries up, once the pool dries up, what happens then? And is there going to be a gap? Is there going to be unmet expectation in the community? So I think money, the people that hold money, they have great capacity to teach people what to chase. And if they're chasing after particular words or outcomes, as opposed to chasing what is really deeply needed by their community at that time. I mean, it's one thing to craft a language based around what is needed in the community, but to actually craft what the outcomes are different. And I mean, I go back to those labour market programs because so many programs are actually funded based around how many jobs you're going to create. And one of them that I was working on many years ago had to create 250 jobs in a population of 250. Now, you look at the funding contract, and everybody knows that that's just not going to happen. So why bother? Why can't we just cut through the rubbish and do what actually needs to happen in that community and start at the end? So what happens? And what happened in that town once the funding dried up was the entity that was managing it took all of the assets and left. So the hope that was built up, and it was built up during that time, it wasn't only destroyed for that program, it was destroyed for future programs as well. And I've seen that happen in a lot of communities. And I mean, one of the reasons that jumping into this work chat and running social impact in the regions is I want to see communities and the doers or the leaders in communities be more robust, so they have the chutzpah, have the will to say to the funding bodies, that's not what we need here. We need something different, and to not take the money because they're getting the scraps off the table, because I just think we can do better than that.
Absolutely. And but as you say, we're nowhere near so bold as to say we have the answer, but we've done a lot of stuff, and we think, well, there's certain principles by which we approach things. One of those is we start with saying we're designed to disappear, not to say we're going to be fly in, fly out. We're going to support the community for a time after the event and the program, but we also don't want to be the focus. We don't want to necessarily have everybody come to us with the answers. The answer in the community is just our job is to facilitate, provide what we call that scaffolding around it. And the other one, to pick up on what you said, is not necessarily focusing on that end impacts. We keep repeating that. It's not, yes, the jobs will come, we're sure, and the economic diversification and the investment, and we get it. And we have 128 indicators, which we look for long-term impact. But what we focus on is those outcomes, what we call the enabling conditions by which those impacts will be realized, quite often different than anything we see when we come into it, but also defined and developed by the community. We want the capacity for them to develop the impact almost as much, if not more, than the actual impact itself. And just to reiterate, I know people hear us talk about it, but those 5 conditions is if they have increased clarity as far as who's doing what, if we have greater connection and connectivity in and out of the community and within our community, and make sure we have diversity around the table. Do we have capability and capacity of our individual leaders in our institutions? Are we collaborating for purpose and getting around the things that matter, which is why we do our focus areas? And finally, advocacy and promotion. Is there a voice for that particular community? And again, we're running the Readiness Index to actually attempt to measure that. But also picking up on your point, Kerry, it is an experiment, as it were. We're doing these things, we're doing these weekly talks to get people's feedback. We're saying, look, here's what we're seeing, and here's the approach, but it's an open conversation. So we love both from practitioners, other intermediaries, and then to continue that conversation as we lead to something, which I know everybody watching this is going to attend, the Social Impact in the Regions Conference, the first week of September. And the program's shaping up pretty good for that, yeah?
Program's shaping up really amazingly. So the theme itself, we are basing each day around that Nirvana song, Come As You Are. But we've actually kind of escalated Auntie Vicky's theme, Your Superpowers, which was the conference dinner theme. So everything in the conference is now embraced within that, Unleash Your Superpowers, which is really exciting. So day one is obviously exploring as you are, and we're building context around how we got to here in terms of systems change. And the opening panel, I'm finding it, developing it as challenging as it's exciting, because I really want to give opportunity for about half the audience that comes will be not-for-profit practitioners, so they'll be actually working with their boots on the ground. And the other half are either small business owners, government, or funding bodies, policymakers. So we wanted to give an opportunity for both to be able to explain, well, this is how we got to here from a policy sense, from a funding sense, and then, well, this is how we got to here from an on-the-ground sense. So those first 2 panels will give opportunity to explore that. And look, I won't go into the whole program now. It is in its current form online on the conference website, but we are going to do another short video and go into the program a little bit more depth.
Absolutely. Really looking forward, especially that opening panel, just setting the stage, those few panels, and then very practical, hands-on, informed by our work in Grafton, and carrying over some of the insights from Kempsey, but also nationally relevant, so that the commission for us and the opportunity for people that are coming is able to apply those lessons back home. So we're really, in whatever the regions are. So really excited for the national conference in September. I think that's it for at least for my end. Is there anything more, Kerry, that we need to have you on about?
Well, maybe not, but I would like to highlight being in Grafton, having my boots on the ground. I'm just finding this most incredible, embracing town here. So, as I write often, this is my first year of empty nesting. So, being out and about and learning how to live in a new community is really interesting. And the cultural scene here, I've already been to the opera in Grafton. I'm going to a rock and roll high tea on the weekend. It's a really cool place to be.
Excellent. Well, look forward to hearing more about that next week when we catch up. And next week we are going to be back in Grafton. We're going to be in Kempsey doing some work. We'll share more about that next week. And just really thanks again for everybody going on the journey with us. Love your comments and your feedbacks. And look forward to seeing you in September.